This is how I got involved with MUFON. When I started researching the Mayan prophecies in 2012, because I wanted to write a science fiction book and take all of the prophecies and write a sci-fi story, it started getting me into the UFO field. And it was the Hopi Indians, the Mayan prophecies with Kukulkan and some others, and I started getting involved in ufology. So I started researching the book in '95. In, I think, March of '98, I became a MUFON member, then the state section director, and then the state director. But if it wasn't for the book and researching 2012, I don't know if I would have got involved in ufology. But, the more you look, the more you find. And that was the interesting thing. And even today, I still find more. And I'll tell you about that as we get started. So let me put my glasses on. I used to be able to see. I can't see anymore. Okay, I always start off talking about the organization. The Mutual UFO Network started in 1969, and it was really after Project Blue Book ended. That was from 1952 to 1969. They looked at 12,701 cases, and they concluded that UFOs were not a threat to national security. So at that point, the Mutual UFO Network started doing the investigations that the Air Force says they don't, but we know that they still do. And we have 3,000 members, and we have 900 certified field investigators. It's an international organization, and one of the points of doing these conferences is to get more members. So if you want to join up, we have applications. You can become a field investigator. But it's a real first-class organization. It's a scientific organization. The media called me, a number of different ones, and they asked, do you guys dress up and stuff? I said, no, we don't. This is a scientific organization. We do investigations, and it's kind of ridiculous. But when you look at the psychology of it, and you can really back into this, that was the whole point. When the Air Force asked the Brookings Institute to look at the implications of extraterrestrial contact, their recommendation in 1960 was you can't tell the people the truth, and you have to debunk them and make fun of the people who bring it forward. And you can look it up. I wrote to the Brookings Institute. I got a copy of the report. And that's what's been ingrained in everybody's minds. And I also tell them when they call that, you, the media, the college institutions, you've all ignored this question. And there's going to be a case that you can't ignore. And then the question's going to come, why didn't you investigate this? Why didn't you take it serious? Because this is a science, and you can get a PhD in this. There's just so much to know. And Linda probably, you've been doing it for years. I just keep learning as I go along. You could really get a PhD in this. There's so much, in different branches. Okay, a couple of years ago, before our 2008 case, where we hit the media and television shows, MUFON was getting about 150 cases a month and 1,500 a year, and right now we're getting over 400 cases a month and about 5,000 cases a year. So another point of having the conferences is to make it comfortable for you to report your sightings. And I think the media has been pretty good in Pennsylvania, both in Pittsburgh and here. If you watch the news last night at 11 o'clock, they did a little segment on our conference. It was very serious, and they reported the facts of what we're doing here, and it was pretty good. So I think this area, we're bringing it forward where it's taken as a serious topic. Okay, that's the book I got involved in that got me here with MUFON. It is a sci-fi book, but I've taken all of the 2012 prophecies, and there's 19 different ones I'm going to talk about, and I took what I know about ufology, and I wrote a book that I think, if this does happen, that this is going to be the scenario. And it's funny, there's 4 or 5 things in there that I predicted. And actually, I wrote it in '07. I wrote on page 12, the financial and housing market will collapse in the summer of 2008. You can look it up, and it happened. And there's different stuff in there that actually is coming true. What you see is a flooded version of the United States where I swelled all the rivers, and the Great Lakes merged together into the Great Lake. And I have another picture I'll show you from National Geographic that just came out last month, and it shows the world with no ice if it all melts, which has happened before. And it didn't happen because of global warming, and we'll get into that. Because obviously if this happened years ago, it couldn't be global warming. So that's the book. If you're interested, the vendor room's down the hall. You know, all of our speakers are selling books, the T-shirts. I got my stuff, so we'd like you to frequent that. Can we turn that up?
Surrounded by miles and miles of icy wilderness, the Svalbard global seafloor has been built to withstand nearly every catastrophe. Its present content, millions of feet which could prove indispensable to our survival.
The vault is sure against flooding. We're well above sea level if the ice on the pole should melt. It's safe against earthquakes. We're 130 meters inside the mountain, so we should be very safe against nuclear warfare and even asteroids.
More than 1 million seeds of nearly every crop variety from nearly every country in the world will soon be stored on these shelves. The permafrost transforms the mountain into a giant freezer, but the vault has also been cooled to a further minus 18 degrees Celsius, which could keep the seeds pristine for thousands of years.
Of course, this isn't the world's only seed bank. There are more than 1,000 others in different countries. The problem is, so many are vulnerable. The collections in Iraq and Afghanistan, for example, were destroyed in their respective wars.
Okay, I don't know if you know about that. There are 1,400 seed banks built. It's managed by the Global Crop Diversity Trust Fund. They had to specify 300 feet above sea level, because if all the ice melted, it rises sea level 220 feet. So they have to be built 300 feet above sea level. They're stored to -1, or she said -8 degrees. The seeds will last for 1,000 years. And the interesting thing is the people building it said they were told it has to be completed before the end of 2012. And it's there in case of asteroid strikes, nuclear wars, climate change, or natural disasters. Like I said, in researching 2012 and ufology, the more I look, the more I find. I find stuff in science magazines, National Geographic, and it all comes together to both of these fields. Another project that's going on right now is the Frozen Ark project at the University of Nottingham in the UK. They're collecting DNA samples of every species and they're storing them. Isn't that kind of interesting that that's going on? And you know, in my other reading, some people believe that Noah's Ark was not 2 of every animal that was brought into Noah's Ark. It was actually a UFO that took DNA samples of every creature, and that's how it got restarted again. And when I saw that 2012 movie, do you remember at the end they were bringing all the animals in? I said, man, you missed a golden opportunity. You should have had little vials on the shelves labeled giraffes, lions, tigers, and bears. And that would have been a creative idea, you know. I have to get with Bill Burns and make some movies. All right, there we go to the next one.
An ordinary household freezer, vulnerable to electricity. Her fate ultimately be ours.
Don't go too far.
When I look up at night and I see a quiet sky, all I can think of is a shooting gallery with wayward asteroids that have us in their sights.
Asteroids are chunks of rock believed to be the debris left over from the birth of the planet. They can be as small as a grain of sand or as large as the state of Texas.
I'm not worried about the black hole crumbling Earth. I'm not even worried about the gamma ray burst. I'm worried about the next asteroid.
The average handgun fires a bullet at approximately 1,000 feet per second. The average asteroid travels more than 60 times faster. And when a large enough one of these cosmic cannonballs hits a planet, the effects are catastrophic.
Look at the moon.
Every night it comes out to remind us that on cosmic scale, the universe is vital. The universe can be catastrophic.
There are tens of thousands of craters on the moon, and each was caused by an asteroid impact. Even more have collided with the Earth, but weather has softened the scars.
Perhaps light reflected a near-Earth object. But really, these are the things that can render us extinct.
The last species to witness a giant asteroid collision didn't live to tell about it.
So there was a major asteroid strike just off the Yucatan Peninsula. That almost certainly was the primary cause of the extinction of the dinosaurs.
To keep us from going the way of the dinosaurs, a network of professional and amateur astronomers around the globe are combing the galaxy. They map and name every asteroid they find, and so far they've located more than 100,000.
One was discovered recently, the end of 2004. Fine, it was a new asteroid. Who cares? Until you start plugging in the orbital parameters into your computer. You plug those in, and then you watch where it goes. You can project forward where you expect to find this thing in the future. You know what we found? This asteroid, on Friday the 13th, April 2029, will come close enough to Earth to dip below our communication satellites in orbit around Earth.
This asteroid, called Apophis, will just miss us on this go-round. However, depending on how the Earth's gravity affects its orbit, we may not be so lucky when it returns 7 years later.
All right, this is a big point why I'm showing you this. And remember the name Apophis, A-P-O-P-H-I-S. I want to talk about this for a little bit. We created Project Space Guard in 1998 by NASA, and its job is to identify all near-Earth asteroids. They found 1,100 of them that are 1 mile wide. Okay, Apophis is a half-mile wide asteroid, and they have to complete this categorizing by 2020. The countries that are most likely to be hit by asteroids are China and the United States. That's just the plane that these asteroids come in on. Apophis was found in 2004. We're tracking it. We get hit with a half-mile wide asteroid about every 70,000 years. Apophis is the first asteroid being given a level 4 threat on the Torino scale. It's a half-mile wide asteroid, has a 1 in 37 chance of hitting, and as you heard Neil say, all you need is something to throw it off a little bit, either our gravity, or you could hit a tiny little pebble out in space, and that could move it over. And I think it's a serious deal. When I went out to Arizona, to Winslow, where that asteroid strike is, that's the first time I found out about this Apophis. It was listed there and actually shows the trajectories. It would hit with a force of a 500 megaton bomb. It's not a planet killer. It's big enough to wipe out a small country or a state. It would take out Pennsylvania if it were to hit. The trajectory on it is across the Yucatan Peninsula into Nigeria. If it hits Nigeria, Nigeria's gone. All right, it's not a planet killer, but it certainly would cause a lot of devastation. As he said, it's going to dip below our satellites. You realize how close that is? Satellites are at 26,000 miles, and this is coming in at 22,000 miles. And it even gets pulled by our gravity at that point, because satellites are held by our gravity. And if it's closer than that, it gets pulled in a little bit. And we don't have the technology right now to do anything about this. They talk about tugboats. You don't want to blow it up, because physics-wise, 10 pieces cause more damage than one big one, because there's more surface area. So you don't want to blow it up. You got to somehow nudge it with a little tugboat with an engine, just pushing it a hair, and over the course it'll miss us. But we don't have any of that technology right now. This isn't Deep Impact or Armageddon. You can't do that. But the interesting thing is, you don't hear anything about this asteroid. It passes every 7 years. It passed April. It always passes on Friday the 13th every 7 years. April, Friday the 13th. I told everyone, read the papers at work. I told everybody, read the papers. You got to read about this Apophis. This is amazing. Got the paper, Friday, Saturday, not one word mentioned. Got online, Googled USA Today, not one word was mentioned about this asteroid. And I find that absolutely incredible. I could not find anything on this asteroid. And it's, to me, it's the most dangerous one, and he even said it, it's the most dangerous asteroid out there. And it's being kept quiet in case something happens because really the governments of the world don't believe you can handle the truth, and it's better not to tell you the truth than to cause panics. And like I mentioned with the Brookings Institute, that is the recommendation, and it's been the policy for the last 50 years that the government knows more than you and they'll do what's best for you. And I think you see that in a lot of ways. That's what's going on. So, you know, as I'm reading other magazines and all of that, then March of '09, I see an article that talks about a 152-foot asteroid. Remember, this is a half-mile one. It passes by at 44,000 feet, so about twice the distance of Apophis. And, you know, I'm reading that it's about the size of the one that exploded over Tunguska in 1908. It could flatten 80 million trees. The Sidling Space Station said, no object of that size or larger had been observed to come closer to the Earth. How do they not know about Apophis? How do they not know? This is the space agency that tracks all of this stuff. No mention of it. And you got to wonder, are things kept from us? You know, and then you probably heard less than a year ago, Comet Elenin. Okay? Well, who found it? It was a Russian astronomer. It wasn't us. It wasn't the, you know, millions and million dollars that we spend on Project Space Guard and the Sidling Space Station tracking. We didn't find it. Some Russian guy found it. Now, I thought we had the better technology. So he finds it. And the interesting thing is Elenin will be its brightest if we have a clear sky tonight and tomorrow. So if you brought your binoculars or a telescope or something and you look to the sky, you can actually see this comet Elenin passing. This is the closest it's going to come. So everybody, you can feel safe. It's 22 million miles away, about a quarter the distance of the sun, and it's 2.4 million miles above us on the plane. It's not going to hit us. It's not going to do anything to us. But you know, it's very similar to Hale-Bopp. It's a little smaller than Hale-Bopp, but you can see it very similarly. But the point is, we're not being told about what's going on, and you see that throughout ufology also. Another interesting point, in June of '09, our government turned off the satellite that's used by amateur astronomers to track bolides and small objects entering the Earth. So you would not know, an amateur astronomer probably won't be able to find a small asteroid coming in. It was turned off, it was allowed to be used, but the reasoning was that satellite is used to track nuclear explosions if someone tests one. And the thinking was if that country can find our satellite based on that information. So they didn't want anybody finding that satellite. But was that the reason? Or was the reason is we don't want amateur astronomers finding small asteroids coming in? You know, you just find all of this stuff. I'm not a paranoid person, but there's too much of this that goes together. And this is why I just don't believe what I'm told. You know, I don't believe the party line that the government gives you, and I know their way of thinking that you can't handle the truth. You gotta do whatever you did again. Okay, that's the path of Apophis to the Earth. Okay, I don't know if you can see the countries there, but that's going into Nigeria. It'll pass over the Yucatan Peninsula. I always like to talk about polls that have been taken over the years. I did a little bit of research to find this. You can see back in 1947 with Roswell, the question was asked, do you believe there's life in space? Do you think we've been visited? And only 9% of the people believe that. It's interesting, if you look at 1977, they asked airline pilots, and that was the highest total of people who believe in UFOs and that we've been visited, at 70%. Drops off again, then you get the Phoenix Lights with Dr. Lynn Katai, who spoke last night and will speak tomorrow. And with the media coverage, we shoot back up to 72% of people believe. And it kind of drops off again. You get to more recent years, and you see as people are exposed to more, you have the internet, you can look things up yourself, you're running 80%, 75, 80% of people believe there's life in space, believe we've been visited. Other polls there, Sci-Fi Channel, Roper, AOL, and those are big surveys. When you're talking 136,000, 48,000 people, 448,000 people, I mean, that's not a small poll of 500 people, plus or minus 3%. So you could see that the people believe that this is real. I believe that people can handle the truth, even if it's something terrible that they don't want to tell us. I do believe we can handle it, and that's the only way you can react to it. You got to know what the story is. Not have somebody else taking care of you. I'm not a baby right now. I'm not in diapers anymore. We continue. 14% say they've seen a UFO. So you guys, that 14% should be calling MUFON.com and putting the case in so we can investigate it. We have 3,000 investigators. And it's 2.5% to 3% of people believe they've been abducted. And you take those numbers, 3% of 312 million people, and you have about 9 million people in the country believe that we've been abducted. Okay, I accidentally hit that, but we can keep going. Okay, these are some of the topics we're going to talk about now. The Mayans, the Hopi Indians, Edgar Cayce, Cayce, Dixon, Papal prophecy, Sitchin, Bible code, and Revelations. Let's start off with the Georgia Guidestones. Hopefully you've heard about that. Somebody in Georgia built 5 granite tablets in cuneiform writing that have 10 directives on it. And the first directive says that the human population has to be kept under 500 million to stay in balance with nature and really in balance with nature. So that's the carrying capacity of the earth is 500 million as far as natural resources go. Nobody knows who built this Georgia Guidestone. The contractor had to sign a disclosure of secrecy to not reveal who contracted him to build it. And it's out there. So it's an interesting directive. But let's start off with the Mayan culture, because that's what got me involved in all of this. The Mayans, they were around from 300 BC to 1500 AD. The period I'm going to talk about is 300 to 900 AD, really almost the Dark Ages. The Mayans were a Stone Age culture, and then, like the Egyptians, all of a sudden they're building suspension bridges, they're doing astronomy, medicine. They created the most accurate calendar ever created, more accurate than our Gregorian calendar. And the reason it's more accurate, they started with the date of 12/21/2012, and they worked the calendar backwards so that they would not be off on that date. And it's absolutely the most accurate calendar that's ever been created. Now remember, you're talking about people back in 500 AD. The rest of us are working with, bronze tools, and they're doing astronomy at that point, yet they weren't like 2 years earlier. One of the things they said was that in their records, and there are some records still available, they said there's a dark rift in the center of the sky. And in 2002, we found that there's a black hole in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. But somehow they already knew that 1,500 years ago. Then we discovered in 1993 that when the sun rises on the morning of 12/21/2012, we will be in the exact center plane of the Milky Way galaxy. And somehow they knew this 1,500 years ago. And it even gets better than that. They created 3 calendars. One of them is on a 25,800 year cycle. Okay? Now, every 25,800 years, we're in the exact center plane of the Milky Way galaxy. How could they possibly know that? And the reason that happens is because of the wobble of the Earth. Every 72 years, it changes 1 degree, and it takes that amount of time so you get a full rotation, you see the same sky. And somehow they knew that. And there's no way they could have that knowledge unless somebody gave it to them. And their calendar ends on 12/21/2012. So if you look at 25,800 years ago, what was going on? Well, the last ice age started right around that time. It marked the end of Neanderthal and the rise of Cro-Magnon. Now, the interesting thing with Cro-Magnon is he was only around 10,000 years. So those of you, hopefully it's not a lot of you, that believe in evolution, can't be evolution. Cro-Magnon could not appear and only be around 10,000 years. It just doesn't happen that way in evolution. It would have taken 100,000 years for something like that to happen. Only around for 10,000 years. Another interesting fact I came across is that us, Homo sapiens, we have 223 genes that are not shared with our predecessors. You don't find them in Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, hominids, apes, chimps. We have 223 genes that you don't find in evolution, and that cannot be a part of evolution. That was introduced into our DNA. Okay, some of the other things going on in 2012 is the Jewish 7,000-year calendar ends, the Kyoto Treaty ends, and scientists found that we will have the most solar sun flare activity in 2012. That will be the peak of solar activity. Now, if you notice the last 2-3 years, it backed off, and they don't know why. We were supposed to be in a cycle of every year getting hotter and hotter, the planet getting hotter and hotter, sun flares increasing until 2012. The last 2-3 years it backed off. I'm getting a lot of snow right now, which is fine with me because I snowmobile. So the Mayans also, their most sacred text is called the Popol Vuh, and it tells of extraterrestrials. And this is how I got into this MUFON thing, is I'm reading this, and this sacred text is talking about extraterrestrials coming to Earth, and that they had created a perfect human species. They then destroyed it, and they replaced it with a dumbed-down version. And it's the same thing the Sumerians say 7,000 years earlier, 10,000 miles away, that it was a creation. They didn't like what they created because he was too smart and dumbed it down. And now you think, okay, well, you have these apes, you got these hominids, somehow we got these Neanderthals, you know, we got genes that don't belong there. Maybe the Neanderthals weren't smart enough. They were kind of ape-like. Then you got the Cro-Magnon guy, we tried him out, and then we created humans. It's very possible. Okay, and that's what I read into this. But I know somehow God's in this equation, whether it's his plan, because there is a spiritual side to us. This isn't just it. Something else happens, and we do have a spirit or a soul. Okay, there's the other calendar they have. It's on a 5,125-year cycle. Also ends 12/21/2012. If you go back 5,100 years ago, you get Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids being built. And there are other people who believe that there will be a vibrational shift in our consciousness next year when the 13 crystal skulls come together, and that's the theory with that, it'll change us. And I have a crystal skull right here, okay? You might be able to buy one in the vendor room. This is not a real one, but that's the crystal skull. So that's one of the other theories with that. I do want to say that the Mayans, though, they never said anything was going to happen in 1221. They just said it's the start of a new cycle, that every 25,800 years, it takes the one cycle and we start over again. We'll be going into the 5th cycle. Never said anything about disaster, destruction. They never said anything about that. We go into another cycle. And somehow they knew that it took 25,800 years to do that. So you'll see the same stars that you saw 25,800 years ago. Different stars than the pharaohs saw when they built the 3 pyramids that matched up to 3 stars. Different than what you saw in 10,000 BC, 50,000 BC. And it's just interesting. How did they get that knowledge? Okay, they also have another legend of Kukulkan Khan, who was a Caucasian male with blonde hair who walked out of the sea. He had that elongated skull, which is why then they started putting boards on their kids and elongating their skulls. And they said that Kukulkan Khan gave them all of this technology. They went from Stone Age to creating expansion bridges, doing brain surgery, dentistry, calendars, astronomy. Kukulkan Khan gave them all of this. And they said he would return, and they were waiting for his return. Unfortunately, Cortez shows up in March 15th of 1519. They thought it was Kukulkan Khan. Cortez brought with him diseases, killed 90% of the Mayans and the Aztecs. It was actually the Aztecs that he showed up, but obviously they know the prophecies, and they're all part of that down there, and stole their gold. And he took the Mayan texts and destroyed them all. And there's only a couple left, and that's where we get this information from. Well, that entire history would have been gone if some of them weren't stored away, almost like the Dead Sea Scrolls. We had to put them in these jars and hide them in a cave so that they're around. And that's such a shame, It's really same as what the Romans did in Alexandria when we conquered Egypt. All of that old information was all burned and destroyed because they didn't like it, and that's lost forever. So that's how I really got started in this whole ufology and writing my book. Let's talk about the Dogon tribe. And I'm going to talk about 19, 20 different theories here. But what the Mayans know is very similar to the Dogon. They're in Africa, in Mali, obviously very primitive, and they worship a twin star system called Sirius, A and B. All right, they have no way of knowing that this is out there because you can't see it, but yet they know about it. They also know that there's a third one that's a dwarf that you can't see at all. They've got this knowledge, and they obviously have no technology. They live in huts, and they also believe that extraterrestrials from Sirius visited Earth and gave us our knowledge, and they will return in the age of Aquarius, which is the next age, which might be like the Mayans saying we go into another cycle. Everything is cycles. And plenty of people who were involved in the Dogon say there's no way they can know this. Somebody had to tell them. But yet they knew this, and it's documented 100 years ago. Before we had any of our technology and scientific proof, they had this knowledge. And like I said, there's a history out there that you don't get taught in school. And maybe one day I'll take the time to put this all together, since I can retire in 4 months and teach a class in college. There is just so much of this that you don't get in grammar school, a different history than what we were told. Okay, let's talk about the Hopi Indians. The Hopi Indians have been around since 500 BC to the present, and they say in 2012 the Earth will be shaken by an explosion that'll rock North and South America. They say that there's been 3 previous cleansings, one by an asteroid or a rock that hit the Earth, one by the Ice Age, one by the Great Flood. They also say that the sacred ones will return on a flying shield, very similar to the Book of Enoch. Remember when he goes up into the flying wheel in 593 BC? It's very interesting. If you read that, it sounds like a UFO encounter to me. And the interesting thing is he comes back from that encounter with the knowledge of how to make steel. Okay, so they were in the Iron Age, and Enoch brings back how to make steel. Where did he get that from? What was that flying wheel that he went into? And it's in the Bible, so then it has to be true. It's in the Bible. Okay? The Romans also talk about flying shields, very similar to the Hopis. And remember, there's not supposed to be any contact between Hopis in the southwest of America and Romans in Italy, yet they all got similar stories, and they're 10,000 miles apart. The Hopis also do a kachina dance, and they dress up in an outfit that absolutely looks like a spacesuit with a helmet on. Why are they doing that? They don't have feathers on, but they do a kachina dance. It looks like you're in a spacesuit. Other Hopi prophecy that have come true, they said that we will one day speak through spider webs, which it means phone lines is what it's taken to mean. We would ride in carriages without horses, and that women will wear men's clothes. So they got it right. They said this 200 years ago, 300 years ago. They said all of this. They said in the end, they didn't say that women will take over, and they did, so they left that part over. That's in my other book. I'm creating a society where women are in charge. And that's in my next book. It's coming. It's inevitable. So, all right. In the end, they said a purifier named Pahana will arrive, destroy all the evil people, but there will be a flood, famine, and hailstone. Very similar to the book of Revelations. Okay, Edgar Cayce. You've probably heard of him, the sleeping prophet. He foresaw the destruction of Japan and the west coast of the United States in 2012. He names it. He also said there would be upheavals at the poles, a reversal of the hot and cold climates. And this is in the 1920s, he wrote this. And in the 1920s, he said that there will be solar bursts from the sun that would warm the earth up. Okay? And how did he know that? We didn't know that in 1920s. That's discovered, in the 1970s. He knew it 50, 60 years before time. And that was his predictions specifically about 2012. Okay, Jean Dixon. Jean Dixon, in regard to 2012, had a vision. She woke up looking out of her apartment in Washington, D.C. She saw a barren wasteland in 2012. That was the vision that she had. And that concerns me because my son lives in D.C. My daughter lives in Wilmington, North Carolina. Got to get them away from the coast. She also had a vision of Queen Nefertiti holding a Muslim boy, and she said this boy would grow up into a very charismatic person, a lover of peace, but at the age of 50, in 2012, he would become the Antichrist. And that's her prediction. I'll let you figure out who's 50, who may have a Muslim background. This is what she said. The coincidence, see, a lot of this is coincidence. You could say it's coincidence, but a lot of it comes together. That's what she said. Now, she did give a birth date, and it's 6 months different. And if you're interested in our president, he's 50 right now through August. He fits it. I'm not saying he's the Antichrist, although there is a poll that says that 20%, 60 million people believe he's the Antichrist, and that's a Harris poll. I'm not saying he's the Antichrist, so this is being filmed. I'm not saying he's the Antichrist. But you look at coincidence. I mean, you go back 20, 30 years and you say, well, we'll have a Muslim president. I'm just telling you, what the coincidence is. I'm not saying that that's what it is. All right, let's move on to Father Malachi. Okay, 1124 AD, Father Malachi O'Morgair. He's the first Irish saint. He wrote something called the Papal Prophecy. He names every pope from 1124 to the present. And he says the last pope's name will be Peter, same as the first pope. First pope was Peter. Last pope's name is going to be Peter. He says there'll only be 266 popes. And the interesting thing, like I said, it's all coincidence. Pope Benedict is Pope 265. I'm telling you the truth. Pope Benedict is 265. This guy, 900 years ago, said there's only going to be 266 popes. The naming of number 266 will start the end of days, was his prediction. When the Vatican read his writings, they locked it away for 400 years, didn't release it until 1595. He also, at the end of his prediction, said that he would die November 2nd, 1148 in Clairvaux, France. And he did, of natural causes. So very interesting predictions. But, again, it's coincidence. Benedict could live 10 more years, but you never know. You're at 265 right now. The other thing, keep in mind, calendars are off too. We went from the Gregorian, when we changed calendars, I read that we lost some time. We moved New Year's Day from April 1st to January 1st. So calendars are not exactly accurate right now. Okay, I think a lot of you know him. Jen Stein has had him speak at the Wayne group here, her mainline MUFON group. Zachariah Sitchin. He was the author of The 12th Planet. He theorized that there was a planet on a 3,600-year orbit that will pass by in 2012. I never really believed this because if you look at the science, it's minus 434 degrees in space. Solar radiation boils your blood and DNA, so you'd never, it couldn't happen. But then like 2 years ago, I'm reading in a science magazine that there's a planet out there following a dwarf star that you can't see until it gets closer, and that dwarf star would keep it warm. So there could be some truth to his theories, and he speaks about the Nephilim, which are also in the Bible and in the Sumerian scrolls and texts. There are only other 2012 prophecies. They speak of magnetic poles reversing, and this is something that's true. It has happened. Geologists will tell you, they know it from the stratum in the rock, that our magnetic poles have reversed in the past. What would happen is that would wreck all of our satellites, our communications, our power grids, and it has happened. In 1859, there was a solar flare that fried everything, and our telegraph systems worldwide didn't work. So it has happened in the past, and that's predicted for 2012 because our magnetic field is weakening. Another scientific fact that it's weakening right now. So the result of that would be an increase in the greenhouse effect, the melting of the poles, severe climate change, and really all life systems would be under stress at that time. I want to talk about climate change for a second right now. There's always been climate change. It's a natural process, minimally affected by humans. In 6000 BC, the temperatures dropped 8 degrees on the planet. Then in the Dark Ages, from 900 to 1300 AD, it warmed up 7 degrees. Then it cooled down again for the next 550 years until 1850. If you know anything about science, I mean, in 1850, the Hudson River was frozen. You could walk across it from New York to New Jersey in the summer. The whole King Arthur stuff, it was always snowing, remember that? So we've had this climate change throughout our history. Okay, what's predicted through 2100 is that the planet would warm up 10 degrees from where it is, where it's been in 1850, let's say. So what do we got right now? We're on this cycle where from 1850 to 2100, the planet is warming. And I think Al Gore knew that when he wrote his Inconvenient Truth. But this is a scientific fact. This is how the cycle works as far as global warming goes. There's been 4 ice ages. 800,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, 75,000 years ago, and 26,000 years ago, 25,800 years ago. The interesting thing is they get closer and closer. They're not 800,000 years apart. They're getting shorter and shorter, these cycles of ice ages and melting of all the ice. Every ice age was climate change, but it was on its own. One of the reasons you don't see sea levels coming over the docks and everything is as the Arctic Circle, the Greenland ice sheet, as it melts, the continental shelf is rising. So that's compensating for it, while you don't see 10 feet of water coming over the docks. And also, and this is a fact, if you haven't been to Niagara Falls, it's predicted by 2050, as the continental shelf rises and tips backwards, Niagara Falls is just going to be a stream. It's not going to be what you see right now. And that's a scientific fact, that that's going to happen to Niagara Falls. Something else you need to know is Antarctica in the south holds 90% of all the world's ice. There's only 10% up in the North Pole and Greenland. That's what's melting. South Pole is not melting. It's actually getting thicker at the center. And some of the other things you need to know as far as global warming goes, there's an ice cap on Mars. It's melting also, okay? Because it's sun activity that's doing it. And in Pluto, its atmosphere, the carbon level has doubled, okay? And that's solar activity that's causing that. Some people believe that evolution's speeding up. We only use 10% of our brain and 3% of our DNA. I find it hard to believe that the other 90%, 97% is junk. I think God had a better plan for that. It's not all junk. What people think is that we're going to move into the next stage where we use more of our DNA and our brain capacity, maybe 20%, et cetera. It'll be humanity 2.0. And as far as evolution goes, only 39% of people believe that in evolution. So 61% do not believe in the theory of evolution. I think there is some evolution, but I don't think it explains everything. It doesn't explain a lot of the changes that you see. There's no creatures that are in between morphing. You got to think about it, because you get eaten. I mean, if you had a fly to live and now you're walking around, you're going to get eaten. You don't find those fossils that are halfway in between. You just don't. And like I said, with humans, there's changes in our intelligence, changes in our genes that can't be explained through evolution. Okay, some people believe there's going to be a shift in our consciousness where we'll move away from materialism and towards our next level of potential. It'll be the end of a male-dominated society dependent on government and centered on war. It'll be a global wake-up call. Time will start to speed up for people. People will be compelled to do righteous deeds. They'll have dreams and visions that actually come true. They'll see loved ones and remember past lives. There will be an evolution of consciousness and our psychic ability will increase. There'll be a singularity where everybody will be connected. You'll be able to read each other's minds. There'll be no crime, because as you walk up to me, I'll know exactly what you're thinking, everything you did, where you've been. There'll be no crime, because I'll know what your intentions are and what you've done in the past. So this is some of the thoughts of really our next stage of evolution could be what's happening. This telepathic ability will allow us to, with our minds, operate vehicles, electronics, spacecraft. And as I'm reading that, I'm thinking about Roswell. Remember when they found Roswell, or the stories of Roswell? There were no controls in the ship. There was a cap they wore because they used their minds to control the ship. There wasn't a steering wheel. And these are some of the predictions, and maybe that's how we evolve, if you believe in evolution. Okay. Indigo children and star children have been born since 1982. They're technologically savvy, they question authority, they have higher IQs than their parents, and they will refuse to support the government, pay taxes, and enlist in the military. Like I said, I'm covering 19, 20 different prophecies. I'm reading another magazine in 2009, talks about Tibetan monks, and in the article it says that they say extraterrestrials will save the planet in 2012. Tibetan monks have used remote viewing for thousands of years. What they foresee next year is a regional war, an increase in terrorism, then a regional war between China, India, and Russia over natural resources. They say extraterrestrials have been watching us and they'll intervene in that. They've intervened in the past. They'll reveal themselves so that we won't be afraid of them. They're destined to interact with us, and man will not be allowed to alter the future or destroy the planet. Then after 2012, they say we'll be in tune with spirituality and the mind, body, soul reincarnation connection to God. So you got two different theories there. One is a psychological advancement, like an evolution, and another is there's going to be destruction. And I'm just giving you the 19, 20 different theories. I didn't write them. I just researched them, and I'm telling you, what's out there. Well, you might like 15 of them and not like the others. I always get a lot of flack when I talk about the president, so. But I didn't write it. I'm only telling you what Gene Dixon wrote. I didn't write it. Okay, this is Sir Isaac Newton. Interesting thing about Isaac Newton, obviously he discovered gravity, right? He got hit on the head with an apple, figured out on gravity. But he spent half of his life trying to decode the Bible. He thought there were messages in the Bible, and he spent half his life decoding it. Michael Drosnin wrote 2 books called Bible Code, which I read. Really interesting. He took the Old Testament, he took 2 other novels. I believe they were Gone with the Wind and War and Peace. A computer program, put all 3 books in. They have about the same number of words and lines, so about the same size. And he ran it, he applied numbers to letters, so it's a computer program. And his conclusion was that the Bible is a cryptogram and it foretells the future. So they started running this program. And in the Bible, there are 50, call them prophecies, or where the words cross each other on the same page that are true. They've come true. In the other 2 books of the same size, there's only 1 in each, which is just your statistical probability of what would come true. But the Bible has 50 that was found. So when they ran 2012, and the words that appeared that crossed with that are the words "earth annihilated." And they found in Deuteronomy 12:12, it says that only God could have written the Bible. It was sealed before God. That's also in that program. I also read that the Torah is written without any spaces, and that if you alter a single letter or word, you can alter the future. So I think as we get more advanced, we can use the Bible to figure out what's actually in our future. And just think about who could have wrote that, all right? So, that would be absolutely amazing. The fact that there's 50 predictions in there that are true, that alone is amazing. Okay, other scientists believe that the Earth has passed its tipping point. We're headed toward a galactic midnight. We're suffering from overpopulation, pollution, ozone depletion, terrorism, climate change, economic collapse, and that hurricane activity, earthquakes, etc., are affecting the planet. They're on the increase. Bats are dying from white nose syndrome. Bee colonies are dying from colony collapse disorder. SARS, HIV. Obviously, everything's not going in the best direction. I think we all know that. Another area to look, another theory is the web bot. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They created a computer software program. It was an internet bot to predict stocks. They take keywords and then they look and see, what comes up. And it was made in 1997 to predict stock market trends. So with that, when they looked at 2012, what they were found, and they go through the internet and they find keywords. And in 2012, they come up with a major catastrophe. In 2012, reversing of Earth's magnetic poles, nuclear attacks, and a major war. That's what the webbot says. So again, you have all these different sources with different 2012 prophecies. Okay. Buried in our DNA is the collective memory of past devastation. Evolution really doesn't explain the sudden jumps in our advancement. New species just show up suddenly. Our DNA shows mutations in it 6,000 years ago. Okay, when the Bible was written 6,000 years ago. That's interesting, the coincidence there. So our DNA shows mutations in 6,000 years ago, 17,000 years ago. I already mentioned the Cro-Magnons 26,000 years ago, and they were not around long enough to be evolution. Humans have the most diseases and genetic mutations of any species on Earth. So they take chimps, who are 96% similar to humans in DNA, but they only have 200 diseases and genetic defects. Humans have 6,000. Doesn't make any sense if we're that close. And other animals are similar to the chimps. They have 200 diseases, let's say. We have 6,000. 1 out of every 2,000 births have some sort of disease or mutation. And one of the theories is that that's because we have the DNA of 2 species in us, that we were genetically altered. We have other DNA in us, maybe those 223 genes that I spoke about. But in my mind, the other argument for evolution is we have the same percentage of salt in our bodies as salt water. Kind of makes you think we came out of the ocean, right? So, I mean, that's a strong argument for evolution. Okay, I'm reading a book. I went down to Myrtle Beach last week. I'm reading this book, which was given to me at the Ohio MUFON conference. And on page 166, it's called The Fatima Secret. Portugal, Fatima, the 3 kids got the 3 prophecies. The 3rd one has been kept secret, right? So in October 13th of 1996, which is the anniversary of the last sighting of Mary, was the 79th anniversary of the last apparition. This is Father Cardinal Ratzinger's statement on the 3rd secret of Fatima, or Fatima. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. This is what he says, and this applies to a lot. He says, when one reads that the oceans will flood entire portions of land, that human beings will die within minutes and in millions, then one should not desire publication of the secret. Knowledge means responsibility. It is dangerous when someone only wishes to satisfy his curiosity, if he is not prepared to do something about his discoveries, or if he is convinced we can do nothing to prevent the prophesied disaster from happening. Now, doesn't that say it all? And you can apply that to ufology, you can apply that to tracking asteroids, you can apply it to a lot of things. If there's nothing we can do about it, or we don't have the power to change it, then you don't deserve to know about it. I don't like that. I really don't. I think I need to know. Okay, let's talk about the Bible, because no prophecy will be complete if we don't talk about the book of Revelation. Now, the Bible and the book of Revelation do not mention 2012. No mention of 2012 in Revelations. But you can read what's there and you can apply it to any period. I'm sure it was applied to 1,000 years ago because they thought the world was going to end. Okay, in Revelations it says a star will fall to earth by the name of wormwood, with the breaking of the sixth seal. So you can question, is that going to be an asteroid strike, which is why I told you about Apophis. The red horse signifies war. So we've had 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan. It's talking about a global war for resources. The black horse signifies famine. I kind of think it signifies oil, since that's what we want. There'll be food shortages, and you need to keep in mind the United States feeds 100 countries. The pale horse signifies plague, and 1 million people a year right now die of malaria. So that's something, you know, we don't cure a whole lot of diseases. As a matter of fact, smallpox is the only plague we ever cured, and polio is the only disease we've ever cured. So you need to keep that in mind. So you wonder, can it be a man-made pandemic from something being released from a lab in China or, you know, out in New Mexico, as to what may happen? There's only 3 species that wage war: ants, chimps, and humans. The white horse signifies the rise of the Antichrist, which is obviously what's in the Revelations. And what it says in the Bible is that this person will be charismatic, persuasive, and a lover of peace at first. There'll be 7 years of bounty prior to his rise. You know, I think of September 11th through September of 2008, let's say. After September 11th, what happened? The stock market went up, housing went up. You could really say that was 7 years of bounty. Then in 2008, you get the collapse in the market. So, you know, in my mind, I'm trying to figure this out. That could have been the 7 years of bounty. Then, 25% of all humans will perish, which would be about 1.6 billion people. The sky will go dark from an asteroid strike or a supervolcano eruption. That's my saying that. And we know that there's been 5 mass extinctions. So then I come across this, Revelations 12:12. I can't see that from here, but it says, let's see, and I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was open, who's the book of life. The something judged according to what they had done as recorded in books. And it's Revelation 20:12. Just another coincidence. I seem to be really good at finding coincidences. Okay, that's what's in the book of Revelations. Let's go back to asteroids. Okay, there's your Grim Reaper. Okay, let's talk about supervolcanoes. There's 2 things that worry me: asteroid strikes and supervolcanoes. Okay, it would take an asteroid of at least a mile in size to cause an Earth-changing event. Apophis was a half-mile asteroid. An asteroid over 4 miles is an extinction event. When an asteroid strikes, it's not like Deep Impact where you can watch it and it looks cool and it's flying by. It doesn't happen that way. If you're close enough to see an asteroid over a mile, the heat from it will incinerate you immediately. So you don't see these type incoming. You just don't, unless it's on CNN. They enter the atmosphere at 29,000 miles an hour. They impact at 2,500 miles an hour. The jolt resonates through the planet like a church bell. 2 seconds later, 10 miles away, there's a magnitude 8 earthquake. 20 seconds later, you hit with a 700 mile per hour heat blast. That's what happens when a 1-mile asteroid strikes the Earth. Okay, as far as supervolcanoes go, there's 8 supervolcanoes around the world. You can see where they're located. 74,000 years ago, 90% of humans passed away when a supervolcano, I believe it was in Indonesia, blew. So, and we know this from the mitochondrial DNA in females. They carry that the gene pool was really shrunk down to a couple of thousand humans in the entire planet. So these things go off. They're huge. There is a supervolcano in Yellowstone Park. It's 40 miles wide by 60 miles wide, and it's 40,000 years overdue from exploding. And it's funny how they found it in January of '09. We experienced 21 tremors in Yellowstone. There were people who go there to vacation, and the lake that they are in kind of moved over, so the ground was swelling up. And then we found out that there's a supervolcano there in Yellowstone. The caldera, when it explodes, it's about half the size of Long Island. And it'll blow right into the upper stratosphere. The skies will turn dark for weeks. Acid rain follows, kills the oceans. You can't grow any crops. And I said to myself, is that the reason why we're building 1,400 seed banks? There's got to be a reason. They got to be done by 2012. Then you also read there's 129 deep underground military bases being built under the ground. So you got to wonder if this all goes together. Okay, like Hamlet's to be or not to be. Picture your current frustration right now. Housing prices are going down. Stocks have collapsed, gone down. At least 9% unemployment, if not 15%. 401ks are dropping. Everybody's pretty upset right now and on the edge. And I want to thank you for coming to the conference, because we never know what the attendance is going to be in the middle of a recession and in this type of economy. But I appreciate you coming. So now think of a series of natural disasters. I think Katrina times 10. You know, think of the type of stuff we've seen recently. Think about these natural disasters that disrupt the food chain. We lose all power for weeks. And it only takes about 3 weeks and we're back into feudal times if you don't have electricity. You know, I was thinking about it and saying, as much as everybody's upset right now, these are probably the good times compared to 2013 if this stuff happens. So think about that, okay? Will it be an asteroid, a global earthquake, or a supervolcano? You know, the other thought I have too is, because I'm involved in the political side at work, and I read a lot of good magazines, and you got to wonder, we're $15 trillion in debt, right, the country? States are $2.6 trillion in debt. And, you know, I can't help thinking, is it like a big shell game? Just whatever it takes, keep everybody happy for the next year. Right? How can we be $17 trillion in debt, $140,000 per person? How is that possible? You know, but there's not really anything being done about it, right? Maybe they can't, and they just know, keep everybody happy, because we got these underground bases, we got another plan for certain people that are going to be going there. It's probably not going to be most of us. And it's just a thought I have, you know, it just doesn't make sense. But if you know this is coming, you just want to keep everybody happy, you know. Give them the internet, give them Dancing with Stars and the McDonald's, and you'll be fine, you know. And I think about the Georgia Guidestones, that the Earth's carrying capacity is 500 million people, and not the almost 7 billion people that we have right now. So these are the prophecies. They've been predicted. It's possible. And I think everybody senses in their collective memory that something could be coming. Okay. Now, I really don't want to end on a negative note, but I'm not done yet. But, you know, I'm reading National Geographic, because I do get a lot of magazines. And here, last month's issue shows a world without ice. A little different than the cover of my book, and I'll have it out by my table in the vendor room. But it shows the Earth without ice. Obviously, you can't see it in the back. You know, Florida's gone, the East Coast's gone, a lot of, you know, Texas, etc. Very interesting. This happened. Sea levels rose 220 feet. This is what the Earth looks like. I'll have it out by my book in the vendor room. It's happened a couple of times, 4 times over, you know, millennium. But it does happen naturally. Okay, like I said, I'm a positive guy. I don't want to end on a negative note. Okay, I think that was the Yellowstone. All right, let's talk about the future, all right? Whether anything happens or doesn't happen, obviously technology is moving pretty fast. Whether it's your iPhone and you know, we shipped almost 1 million iPhone 4s yesterday. Okay, I don't want to talk about where it worked, but that's what we did. Almost 1 million got shipped yesterday. All right. Let's talk about life afterwards, whether it's positive or negative for a while. What the future is going to bring for us is really an era of technology and easy living. Cities, public transportation, everything's going to be well planned out in our new cities. There's going to be a golden age of nanotech and biotech technology. I think a lot of the things that people want, like alcohol, tobacco, firearms, drugs, other things that are illegal right now are going to be legal, because it's going to be the people say, not the government say. Newspapers, think about this, newspapers, magazines, billboards, food boxes, your cereal box, stop signs, it's all going to be electronic paper, fully animated to get your attention. So when you go to grab your box of Cheerios, it's going to, hey, how you doing? You know, everything is going to be animated. Signs are going to be animated. This is what's coming. Everything will be electronic paper on boxes, stop signs. Slow down, you're going 71 in a 25, you know. This is coming, I'm not joking you. Everything's going to be holographic and animated paper. You can go into your living room or on your screen. I want to shop in Milan, Italy. Milan, Italy comes up. Let's go to the shoe store, and you can buy that stuff. You pick your basket. You'll be able to buy stuff anywhere in the world, in any store in the world. And seriously, this stuff is coming. It's not that far away. Entertainment will be the same way in your living room. There'll be all kinds of simulated reality as far as traveling and shopping. You want to, let's go to Venice. Hey, you want to go to Venice? We'll sit in a chair. There's Venice. We'll see everything that's in Venice. All genetic diseases are going to be eliminated by DNA sequencing and nanoscans, where tiny particles will attack cell walls, for example, like cancer cells. Nano weapons are going to be used to disorient the enemy, but not kill the soldiers, not destroy them. Nanorobots will be programmed to build stuff for us, and your biggest expense is going to be your software technology, your software agreements is going to be your biggest expense in the future. People are going to live to 130 years. I told you I'm a positive guy. You know, families are going to go to kind of a one-child policy, not forced on you. Because really, when you think about capitalism is the best contraceptive. As people work and have things, they really have less kids. It's third world countries having 6 and 8 kids. It's Europe, it's North America and Europe that's having really 1.1 children per family. So as people get successful, they end up, it's just a natural cycle. And it's really women working, they have less children. And it is too expensive, and that's a shame. You used to be able to have a living wage that one person could provide. But hey, if this is the natural order of things, then that's just the way it goes, okay? And I hope seniors will be respected for their memories and life experience. Right now, I'd say Japan is probably the only country that actually respects their seniors. Spare body parts will be grown, and extinct creatures will be resurrected. We'll get into bionic athletes, okay, with replacement arms, legs, etc., let's say, competing against pure humans. Think about a football game like that. Then it'll advance where they compete against robots. And robots will do a lot of jobs that humans were doing as their capacity increases and their dexterity increases. We'll go into Generation Cyber. Now, I think this generation's Generation XXX. That's just my opinion. But Generation Cyber will come next. They'll break all Guinness records and sporting records. Robots will perform concerts that'll be absolutely perfect. And the robot industry is going to dwarf the auto industry. Our vehicles will be electric, then they'll become solar, and then they'll become hydrogen, where you burn water, and it burns the hydrogen and releases the oxygen. And just an interesting note, do you know why the dinosaurs were so big? Because oxygen. There was a higher percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere. That's why everything grew so much bigger. So if you burn the water and release the oxygen, maybe everything will grow bigger. So I read stuff and I just put it all together. I don't know if it's true or not. Desalination stations and pipelines will be built. So there'll be water abundant for everyone in the Southwest. The use of water for fuel is going to offset the rising of the sea levels. Think about it. If you're burning water and things and the poles are melting, so it kind of offsets it, so you don't have the problem that people are talking about. Vehicles and homes will have solar skin to power them. Cars will be driven by GPS, and then at some point they'll hover above the ground with electromagnetics. There'll be biometric scanners, and you'll have a chip in your eye, like an iPad. You'll have a lens like an iPad in your eye, and we'll have a post-Google era called PG, where you'll be able to see, like when you come up, I can read your Facebook, you can read my Facebook, it'll all come right on the screen on my contact lenses. That's the type of stuff that's coming. And then there'll be brain-to-brain chips. You can go into the bathroom mirror to brush your teeth. It'll give you a complete scan of your health, the flu, cancer, everything. That's the future that's coming. 4-day work weeks, and you know, we have a choice of which, maybe we don't have a choice of which future is coming, but this future is coming, believe me, it's coming. I want to finish up right now because I probably went over, but I'm in charge, so I probably can. So we're okay? Okay. I thought it was going over. I was asked to speak in Chichen Itza in Mexico next December. So this is the Mayan 2012 tour and everything. I gotta tell you, I got reservations about it because that's kind of a flat area. You know, I like being up in Pittsburgh in the mountains, but I'm actually speaking during that week, and if I come back, you know, it'll be okay. But I'm actually honored for that because, you know, I spent 17 years working on this 2012 question, and it got me into MUFON, which now, you know, I'm on their board of directors, I'm state director, and it would be really cool to finish my 2012 career. On the morning of 12/21/2012, when that sun rises, I'm going to be there in the exact center plane at the biggest Mayan temple that they wrote all of this stuff. So, you know, if you're interested, it's on our MUFON PA website, it's on my website. They were sending me some, I told them to send me brochures, which they did, but they didn't send them UPS. They probably sent them to the post office, and they didn't get to my house. So I will have them at the Pittsburgh conference next week. Okay, that somebody, cartoonist did that. I thought that was pretty cool. He wrote that a couple of years ago in '09, and now you may have the answer to the whole 2012 prophecy. And this might be what it's all about. I don't know, but it could be. All right, and that's another one the same cartoonist wrote with the Mayans in my book. If you're interested, I'll be in the vending room, and you know, we want people with questions really to ask the speakers tonight. There's a speaker dinner tonight at 7:30. You can sit at their table, you can ask a whole bunch of questions, and you know, we need to stay on schedule with our conference. We're trying to get 5 people in about 7 hours. So thank you, and I'll be talking to you. Thanks. Oops.